Hey everyone, welcome back to Cells to Cell. My name is Heem, that's Nick. And today's episode, we're going to actually do something a little different. It's going to be a combination of a reacts and also looking over some papers and this website. Nick found all of this. It's actually super interesting. Nick, you want to give us a little introduction about all of this?
Yeah, I went ahead and him and I were talking this week, and I thought we'd do more. We've had some like intense guests on. We've had Dr. Grover on, and we had Dr. Bang on from Norway, and they were great episodes. And I thought that we would kind of take a step back. We've been throwing a lot of new information at our viewers, and we appreciate you guys watching. Before we get into anything, I'm sorry to break the intro. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ask us questions, email us. We really want to talk to you guys, and we think that this science is so cool. And if you're interested, research along with us, ask us questions. We would love to have conversations. But for this episode, Him and I were talking about. I suggested instead of doing just like a plain reacts like we did to the bodybuilder, why don't we do like a
Hmm.
little bit more of like an investigative episode? I wanted to find something that on the surface sounds really cool, but how can you like really get through all the brush and see kind of, what's really true and what's really, what kind of you have to do your research on and what you might find not to be true. So today we're going to actually watch everybody's favorite. We're going to watch a Joe Rogan clip, and this is a really, really interesting clip. Um, he has a doctor on by the name of Dr. Neil Riordan, and he talks about he has stem cell therapy companies. We're going to look at them in a second. You can see in the tab we have 4 or 5 other things we're going to look at. But after this 5 minute video, you're gonna realize that he's talking a lot about MS and how stem cell therapy, as the title can say, stem cell therapy cures autism. And that might pop out at you and be like, whoa, that sounds really cool, or that's kind of
Hmm.
crazy. But it's kind
Hmm.
of we're gonna look at kind of what Dr. Riordan does and how he talks, and you know I suggested this to him because I was like, we haven't covered stem cell tourism a lot. And that's like a big hot topic, especially as the FDA is moving in specific directions with like licensing biologics and human cell therapies in the United States. But there's a lot of pop-up clinics. There's a lot of clinics in Mexico and Central America, and we're going to learn today about kind of what they offer and why you should really do your research before you commit to paying for a service. So let's go ahead and just watch the 5 minute clip. Um, I'm gonna try not to interrupt as much as possible, but we're just gonna let it play, and then
Just checking.
after we'll talk.
I don't know if the audio is not being shared on my side of things. So could like how you did that one thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do I need to do it again?
I,
Did you do it?
huh?
Do you have the audio from the video?
How do I do it?
I think I'm sharing computer sound now. Let's see if it works.
Okay. Also on the side of
Sorry
the
about this,
recommended
guys.
clips, on the side of the recommended clips, I saw some like Mike Tyson talking about stem cell and Mel Gibson talking about stem cells.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty funny. Looks
All right, let's
interesting.
watch. Yep.
We do a lot of MS. That's probably our number one indication. We just finished a clinical trial, prospective clinical trial. We submitted for publication. It should be coming out in the next month or so, um, and 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 statistically significantly, these patients improved dramatically. And as far as side effect profile, it was highly minimal. I mean, few headaches and few flu-like symptoms, things like
And
that.
how
But
many people?
this was with 20 people. And one of the individuals actually is clinically is perfect, and all of his lesions went away. And we only did one treatment with these. Typically with MS, it's more refractory than rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis, usually after one treatment, people get a ton of benefit. With MS, they usually see after 2 or 3 treatments that they see the most benefit. And we only did one treatment in this trial. But one gentleman had 3 lesions in his brain. All 3 lesions completely disappeared. So MS is a big thing. Rheumatoid arthritis is a big thing. And I can tell you, there's stories not stories, but people talking about their responses, and it's pretty incredible. There's one lady that her husband was a PhD physicist. He carried on working just so she could have insurance to afford the medications, which were around $100,000 a year for her to get treated for rheumatoid arthritis. And she came down it's a little over 3 years ago, November, and she hasn't been on any medication since. She actually started walking around the mall when she was in Panama. And then when she got home, she's completely, pain-free, and she's been pain-free for 3 years. And her husband finally retired because he didn't care about, having the insurance to pay for these very expensive drugs that she was taking. So MS, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus. We don't have a lupus protocol. There's a group in China that's published 6 really good papers on lupus. It's very, very effective in their trials. We haven't done it yet. And then autism, it's not considered an autoimmune disease, but we have a trial. We just completed our autism trial with 33 enrollees with very good results. Many of those kids became non-autistic after treatment.
So that's confusing to me because you're talking about people that are young, right? So why would it have such a benefit for them?
Well, I wrote an article in 2007 about why these cells should be good for autism, and basically, it's the most downloaded article this journal's ever had. I mean, something like 75,000 people have downloaded a scientific journal article, which really doesn't happen very often. But people with autism have inflammatory things going on in their body. A lot of times in the gut, there are at the end of the small intestine, there are these inflammatory nodules that look a lot like Crohn's disease, and they secrete this inflammation that then goes to the brain, inflames the white matter of the brain. The white matter of the brain swells, decreases the blood flow to the brain. All that's intertwined. And then just a few years ago, there was a study that came out, and this is what allowed us to go forward with our clinical trial. They found that there are these 2 inflammatory molecules that are MDC and TARC, and they perfectly correlate with the severity of symptoms of autism. And so we measured not only those 2, but another 30-some biomarkers. We did quantitative EEGs. We did a lot of standardized scoring with a neurologist that read them, before treatment, during treatment, after treatment. So I believe a lot of the problems with autism stem from the inflammatory status, and these cells are definitely anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, they've had some benefit with changing the diet and changing the gut biome of kids with autism, and they've made some benefits for that, and which they believe is also connected to inflammation.
Yeah, absolutely. If your immune system's freaking out every time you eat a piece of bread, and that immune system's throwing out molecules that are swelling your brain and inflaming your brain, then it makes complete sense. And yeah, I think in general the people with autism that do the best are the ones that get that addressed before they come down. There's some other doctors that do functional medicine. They look at their diet, they see if they have any heavy metals and that sort of thing. And the ones that just are slam dunk, do the best, have been cleaned up before they come down.
There's some pretty wild claims in just that 5-minute clip.
What does he mean? What does he mean when he says cleaned up before they come down?
I think he's referring to their diet. Like he's referring to having like a healthy diet and a healthy microbiome in like their gut, because he was talking about the inflammatory markers at the end of the small intestine that they claim are very indicative of brain activity and like maybe some sort of overstimulation, right?
Oh,
And I think that clip is so interesting because in 5 minutes there is so much. We go from MS and how it's going to become the leading. This stem cell therapy is going to become the leading thing. And I want to preface this. I think it's very interesting that this doctor comes on and he says one thing that I definitely agree with, and he will agree with this too. MSCs, he's going to use MSCs as we're going to see here in a second. He mostly focuses on MSCs, MSCs do lower inflammation. They lower
Mm-hmm.
inflammation factors in, places where the immune system is high. And, when you're talking about the cells at the end of the small intestine, that may be true. But, it's correlation versus causation. And that's the question that we're really trying to answer today is like, how much of this is really, really valid? And it's hard, it's really hard to say, especially when you listen to a 5-minute Joe Rogan clip. So I want to introduce, everybody to this guy, this gentleman. So this gentleman, Neil Ryan, okay, stem cell therapy, a rising tide. So he has a book and all this kind of stuff. I have not had the opportunity to read the book, but the thing that I find amazing is like you can scroll through. I encourage you guys to, watch the video again. If if you're still watching, watch the video again and then just kind of go along with me and just scroll through everything and you're going to see he's got like beautiful websites and there's a lot of text and recent news in our network. So I want to focus on two things. So you can see that our companies, so under Riordan Technologies, and this plays into the RGME, the entrepreneurship part, is so this gentleman is a scientist. He has his PhD, he has his PA. He has created what I would consider a little bit of like a stem cell empire. Like he at Riordan Technologies, he has 5 companies. He has the Stem Cell Institute, he has MediStem Panama, Riordan Medical Institute, Signature Biologics, and Aiden Products. Now, the two that I want to focus on are going to be the Stem Cell Institute, which is located in Panama. That's a big thing to notice. And then he has the Regenerative Medicine Institute, the Riordan Medical Institute. And this is located in Texas. So, just initially looking at this, what are EPCS? What are EPCS? Like learn about the importance of circulating endothelial progenitor cells, all this kind of stuff. Huge stem cell buzzwords, huge pictures and graphs, and I gotta say the website's beautiful. But again, he sits on a Joe Rogan podcast. I don't know how long that was, probably 2 hours. And from that 5-minute clip, he claimed that his MSC therapies have basically cured autism and he's cured MS, multiple sclerosis, which is a horrible, like debilitating neurological disease that attacks the myelin sheaths of nerves and basically leaves you impaired. And actually on the topic of MS, he might actually have a contact and she runs another stem cell podcast called HSCT Warriors. If you're interested, look it up. Her name's Dr. Jen Stansberry. And she's friends with my mother, and I've met her before. And she was just an active lady, and one day just came down with MS, and she had, undertook stem cell therapy, and now she's, highly functional again. And it's a very, very incredible
Wow.
story. But her approach towards this as a professional is way different than Dr. Ryden. So, this is beautiful. But so we're going to scroll through this for a second. So stem cell, our science and research this is the page that I've picked. This is really big. And one thing that I really like is the conditions we treat: autism, autoimmune disease, cerebral palsy, frailty of aging, excuse me, heart failure, MS, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, sports injuries. That's a lot. That's a lot to be focused on and a lot to study and a lot to treat. So we scroll down, and if you do a little bit of reading, like always at the forefront, types of adult stem cells, good information. I like it because they focused on human umbilical cord blood and human umbilical cord tissue. That's a big difference. It's the tissue, the mesenchymal stem cell from the tissue. They do bone marrow aspirations and they do adipose, fatty stem cells. But if you keep scrolling down, and I was doing this, so this is cool, our stem cells in the US FDA, if I scroll all the way down, you're going to see that this is, Panama City, Panama, right? So, they're still working in the United States at the US FDA, and, human umbilical cord tissue derived mesenchymal stem cells that are isolated and grown in a laboratory in Panama to create master cell banks that have been used in the United States. These cells served as the starting material for cellular products used in MSC clinical trials for 2, I don't know how, is that Duchenne's,
Yeah.
muscular dystrophy patients under the US FDA's designation of an IND for single patient compassionate use. That's awesome. You read that and you're like, oh wow, they're working with the FDA. They have an IND for like, very specific things. Then you scroll down and I read this heme and it really kind of scares me because what type of stem cells are used in stem cell institute treatments? So you're going to read, so he first published a scientific article and he was using adipose derived stem cells. Great. That's awesome. Okay, we have treated many patients with adipose-derived mesenchymal stem cells in Panama, but we no longer do so because we have found that umbilical cord-derived MSCs modulate the immune system and control inflammation better. Okay, so they started with one cell, they moved to another. I want to skip to this last sentence though, because we've treated thousands of patients, also proliferate and differentiate for older cells. That's not very true. And they're considered to be more potent. Sure. This last sentence, we no longer use cord blood derived stem cells at Stem Cell Institute.
What was the point of that then? Like, why did he even? That's
Exactly. So
crazy.
you can have what I'm trying to show people watching, and this is why you have to be so careful when you're reading this stuff and you're listening to this stuff. You can have 10 beautiful sentences describing your science and how you move to your science. But that last sentence, we no longer use cord blood derived stem cells. And then the kicker, this is the kicker. You scroll down, stem cell collection, umbilical cord tissue collection. It's still on their website as if they're selling it, how they test it. Once we ensure it's 100% safe, the tissue, we extract the stem cells. All donated cord bloods byproduct are normal, healthy births. Great, but you just said you don't use them. And then they talk about all their implantations. So they have IV, which I think is kind of crazy. I think that stem cells IV is a little nuts. IM, directly to an injured site and injured muscle, fine. IA, we've seen that before. This is more for PRP. I'm sure that they spin down stem cells. And then, this administration for neurological conditions, is injected directly into the spinal fluid in the blood-brain barrier. That's insane. That's crazy to me. That's crazy. So, even they have like during a lumbar puncture, experience, an anesthesiologist injects, which is fine. But you deserve the world's leading adult stem cell therapy and research center. I didn't see.
So what? Like,
they claimed
yeah,
that they administered stem cells, and then they said they don't do it anymore.
exactly. I don't know what the conclusion is from that. Do you think you just spotted a flaw in their website? Because
Probably.
if they're saying they use these umbilical cord tissue, like, so why don't you, since you worked in a cord blood bank for your internship, so what's the difference between the cord blood and then the cord blood tissue?
So I'm assuming that the cord blood tissue. So okay, so I can speak on cord blood. So with cord blood, you take the umbilical cord. So you have the umbilical cord, mom and baby, and from there we actually would have kits that you would take like almost like a syringe and suck out the blood. I'm
Mm-hmm.
assuming that when they talk about cord blood tissue, they're talking about both blood and the tissue surrounding the blood.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be the entire umbilical cord and how they digest it and how they isolate cells. I can't speak on, but I think that's what they're talking about. I really, really think that's what they're talking about. But they also talk about how they don't. And on one website, they say that they don't use CD34 positive cells, which are mesenchymal stem cells from umbilical cord blood and just mesenchymal stem cells in general. That's a very, very common cell surface marker that we look for in humans. But then on another website, they say that they use mesenchymal CD34 positive cells in treatments. And it's just really, really hard. So, this was something that I read and I was like, okay, like, because this was the first page I went to after I watched the video. I was like, okay, I'm going to look this guy up. And his website popped up and I was like, the Stem Cell Research in the Stem Cell Institute. Oh, first thing I did was scroll to the bottom, like, where are they? Panama. I was like, okay, so
Mm-hmm.
they are a legitimate stem cell institute. Okay. Then I just started to pick through and I was like, okay, what do they do? And then I found this page and I was just like, man, this is a big red flag. If I have somebody who's like, oh, my wife and I are going down to Panama in 3 months, we have something set up with the Stem Cell Institute. I would be like, have you read this navy blue box? Because this makes no sense to me. And even if you weren't a scientist, even if you had no idea what stem cells were and you went through the entire process of, reading through what everything is, these drop down boxes are beautiful, don't get me wrong. But, you read 10
So
beautiful sentences.
does he just use the bone marrow stem cells or what?
So on another website that
Or
I'm
so it's
I'm
just
not going to show today,
adipose?
like if you're watching, I encourage you to just click through his website, because his five companies are like kind of vastly different. Like they do some of the same
Mm-hmm.
things, but like it looks different. I think two of them are labs. I don't think that two of them are like actual like clinics, but this is a clinic.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like this is his main clinic. Um, but he does I believe on this page, I think here. Oh, come on. I don't want to be in here. Here we go. Yeah, you see right here, where we're at, bone marrow aspiration concentrate. This is the other thing I wanted to talk about. So, all right. So we've looked at his stem cell research stuff. We've looked at his umbilical cord treatments that don't use umbilical cords. Now I want to focus on his regenerative medicine at RMI. So this is Raritan Medical Institute. This is located in Texas. So this is in the United States. This is probably a clinic that is overseen probably like by the FDA. They're probably doing minimal manipulation of cells. So we're going to look a lot like PRP. We're going to look at a lot of, we're going to look at, right here, PRP. Is bone marrow safe? So the biggest thing is all their features. I love it reading this because it gives you so much hope at the top of the page. And then when you scroll down halfway, you're like, ooh. So, protocols leverage complementary regenerative medicine technologies, bone marrow aspirate concentrates, and platelet-rich plasma. Platelet-rich plasma is something that we've talked about on this podcast a lot. Non-surgical use of Raritan products may provide an alternative surgery using simple, elegant solutions to difficult problems. So, shorter healing times, increased vascularization, or, better blood flow, basically, less pain for patients, increased safety rate with the harvest method, reduce inflammation. That's we're getting back into stem cells, and then the decrease of infection, which shouldn't even have to be noted. So they featured, pain management specialists, 30 years of collective research, bone marrow aspiration collection with tabletop centrifuge. There it is, you see. So we're still minimally manipulated. PRP, which is also I can't say that. Minimally manipulated. Man, that's a tongue twister. So efficient bone marrow harvesting. Anyways, so this is where they focus on, BMAC. It's autologous. Yeah, it's autologous, right? It comes from the same person, right? It comes from the
Yourself, yeah.
donor, from yourself. So, this is great. At RMI, we employ a centrifuge specifically calibrated to produce bone marrow concentrate in order to maximize nucleated cell yield. I don't know. I've worked with a centrifuge. You've worked with a centrifuge. I don't know how specific they can get, but that's really cool. I think that's really cool. That's a cool technology. Studies have shown that the process can produce nucleated cell yield percentage over twice the amount of whatever that is. The arteriocyte Magellan. That's pretty cool. I have to look that up. About 20 more % than other competing technologies. But then he goes into the science, and this is again where I'm like, okay, they said that they don't use CD34 stem cells, but here at this institute, BMAC contains mesenchymal stem cells, CD34 positive cells, growth factors, and mesenchymal tropic factors. Again, we're backtracking. It's hard, man. It's hard when you have 5 companies. I'm sure it's hard to like keep track of it, but again, if I'm clicking through your website and I have cancer and I need something like fast, I don't know if I go here. So growth factors and being capable of stimulating cellular growth, proliferation, healing, differentiation. Sure, yeah, kind of. Mesenchymal tropic factors are secreted by MSCs. There's actually another. He actually had another Joe Rogan podcast clip that I wanted to share with you. It's with a UFC fighter, and they're talking about stem cells. But there's way too much cursing. Like I was like, we can't react to this because it's not professional enough. But it's really interesting because Joe Rogan says that he got exosomes shot into his shoulder, and it like healed his labrum tear, like his full labrum tear from like wrestling.
Wow.
And I'm like, that sounds really cool. That's another thing I wish you could watch, but like I'm not comfortable showing all the content. So okay, they talk about harvesting bone marrow safe, and then PRP. Super great. Like, so we can see that he offers a lot of things through 5 different companies. But when we look at so now it's time to like look at the validity of this. So people, if you're still listening, thank you. If you go and you listen to like a PhD give a talk, and it's usually their work. Usually there's a very, very 99.9% that you should trust that those are their results. This is
Hmm.
really hard to trust because you go on Joe Rogan and all stuff. So first thing we're going to look at is this clinical feasibility of umbilical cord tissue derived mesenchymal stem cells in the treatment of multiple sclerosis. And we're not going to I'm not taking you into the full thing, but I just want to look at the abstract. So background is just talking about what MS is. The method is, so this is a safety and feasibility study. So Heem, when you hear that, what do you think?
It was long term, and that
Right.
like they checked all the safety of it, like there was no contamination of anything, and there's no adverse reactions, nothing like that.
Right. So when I think of a safety and feasibility study, I think phase one. I think safety, I think just on normal people. But I think that with this, he was able to actually test on subjects. So remember how in the video he said that these people went through one treatment phase. When
Yeah.
he says that, I think, oh, 1 day of injections, right? No, they received 7 IV infusions. It's 20 million cells over 7 days.
Whoa.
So yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of cells. It's a lot of
Jeez.
cells. So efficacy was assessed at baseline, 1 month and 1 year after treatment. I don't know how much I like this experimental design because I think you should go 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, just in my opinion, or 1, 3, 6, 1 year, whatever. But he lists all this stuff. And they have all the cool, 9-hole peg test, 25-foot walk test. And these are great for testing the improvement of someone with MS. But I look at these results and I say, he says 20 subjects were enrolled. No serious adverse effects were reported. Perfect. Of the mild 8 adverse effects denoted as possible related to treatment, most were headaches and fatigue, as he said that in the podcast. So symptom improvements were most notable 1 month after treatment. And I think this goes back to when we reacted to the bodybuilder Heem, is he felt great after a week, right? And then after that, you're kind of like, okay, they might have probably worn off. Like the half-life might have worn off. The MSCs were either, discarded from your body, or they resided as parasites and just went back to doing normal things on your blood, on your blood vessels. So he said improvements were seen at the EDS scores. So these are all statistically significant, if you will, or not. I don't know if I can't remember. I don't think they are. P-value, don't test me on statistics. But okay, so they tested bladder, bowel, and sexual dysfunction. They did non-dominant hand average scores, walk times, general spectrum. So from here, you're like, oh, okay, this seems like a decent study. They might have found some stuff that might have gotten some answers. So their conclusion is that treatment with umbilical cord blood mesenchymal stem cells with intravenous infusions for subjects with MS is safe and potential therapeutic. So he claims that he cured MS. All he did was prove it was safe. That's it. He didn't cure any MS. He just proved it was safe. So again, really hard. I encourage you. This is free. It's on PubMed.
Yeah.
Give it a look if you're interested. Go look at the figures. It's really, really interesting. Okay, so now here's the buzz point. Here's the final thing. And this is the last topic. I know I've been talking a lot. Team, I'm sorry. People, if you don't like the way
No,
my
this
voice
is
sounds, I
super
apologize.
educational. I like it.
So, what was the title of the video, Heem?
Stem cell cures autism.
Stem cells cure autism? Well, let's look. He claimed he had a clinical trial. This abstract is kind of ugly because it's not broken down like the last one. But basically, this is the background. They use mesenchymal-derived cells from umbilical cord tissue. They have immunomodulatory and anti-inflammatory properties and have been safely used to treat a variety of conditions. True. Whoever's reviewing this has done a good job up to this point. This study investigated the safety and efficacy of mesenchymal stem cells from umbilical cord blood in children diagnosed with autism. So it's autism spectrum disorder. So they're on the spectrum. Efficacy was evaluated with the autism treatment evaluation checklist and a childhood autism rating scale. So they were probably using a psychiatrist, which is great. This is good. It's important to study these children. 20 subjects were received a dose of 36 million cells every 12 weeks, 4 times over a 9-month period. It's a lot of cells. It's a lot of treatment. And were followed up at 3 and 12 months after treatment completion. Adverse events related to treatment were mild and moderate and in shortened duration. So the test of the 8 subjects, so scores of 8 subjects decreased over the course of treatment, placing them lower on the autism spectrum disorder symptom category when compared to the baseline. Okay, how many kids were in this? Did I say 20? 20. Okay.
Yes.
So that was, this is so close, I can't even read it. So 8
subjects.
So there were 12 subjects that just like didn't improve. Okay, fine, that's fine. So the mean, so he talks about the lowest levels of 3 months after less administration. The administration of the children with ADS also therefore determined to be safe. Fine, it should be. Although some signals of efficacy were observed in the small group of children, possible links between inflammation levels and ASD symptoms should be further investigated. So that sounds like, okay, it was like kind of a good study. They saw a little bit of improvement, but it might be a little bit of a sham. And then you scroll up, retracted article. This clinical trial was retracted. And when I tried to look it up and tried to find a reason to tell you guys, I couldn't find anything. Because even if I click on the C retraction notice, it's going to come up, no abstract available. So someone
Because
pulled this.
I think making a claim that inflammation is the main reason of autism, I have no idea if that's true or not. There's some genetic component to it. You can't just say it's all inflammation. Like,
I
yeah,
agree,
inflammation
Heem.
does something to your brain or like any part of your body that causes like it to, kind of degenerate, but like that has nothing to do with like autism. Like I can't even imagine like you making such a bold claim and putting it out on the internet.
Yeah. And it goes back to the thing. I said this at the beginning. It was, the correlation versus causation. Like what's really causing autism? And, you know, you can say that like people are trying to talk about how people who undergo like clinical depression like need like if you change your diet you can fit. It's like that's might be part of it. It might help, but you're not going to cure. Like this guy was like it cures autism. That's what he said on the podcast. Basically, he's like we cured autism, and it's like no, you didn't. You got your article retracted, and you can't do the clinical trial anymore. Oh, and also you pumped 36 million cells into 20 kids over 9 months with I don't even know how many treatment sessions. It's a lot of cells. It's a lot
I
of
don't even know
money.
how they I don't even know how they came up with that like protocol. Like why 7 days? Why those infusions? Like it
Yeah.
makes no sense. And how many cells did they choose? And curious to see how they even administered it. But like that's super interesting thing you found.
Yeah. So, all right, that's my TED talk. That was my investigation. One thing Heem and I have always talked about was we want to get more into like shorts stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Stop sharing. We want to get more into like shorts content. And there's a lot of shorts that like you watch for a minute and it's a clip like that. And you're like, oh my God, so interesting. A prime example. There is a doctor on some podcast who claims that eating chocolate that has 70% cacao increases your stem cells like
Mm-hmm.
immensely by 50% is what he says.
Yep.
And then you go look up the paper, it's from Harvard or Stanford, one of the two. And literally eating the cacao, it like helped improve like your blood flow, like very, very minorly in the heart. And it's like you can't go on and just say that because the final thing I'll say is like you give some of these guys an inch and they're gonna make money off of it, they're gonna take the entire mile, if not two. And I think that that's important. So when you're looking at these types of websites and you're listening to these doctors, it's really important to say like what's true, what's not, and you gotta know how to investigate. Just and all you have to do is go read the website for 15 minutes, and you'll be like, this is really interesting. So, all right, looks like Heem, you gotta get back to work.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. So I
Okay.
hope this episode was informative. I hope it
Yeah.
wasn't like too heavy, but I think it's fun going from Joe Rogan and seeing how you can snowball from a 5-minute clip on YouTube all the way to PubMed and clinical trials. And we learned a lot today, right? And I
Yeah.
hope you guys learned a lot. And I hope, Heem and I had fun researching this. So, all right, Heem, do you have anything else?
No, that's all for me.
Perfect. All right. Well, we want to say thank you guys for watching so much. We really appreciate it. Remember, if you made it this far, like, comment, subscribe, and we appreciate you a lot. Let's keep learning new science and cool science and keep sharing it. So I'm Nick and that's Heem, and this has been another episode of Cells to Cell. See you next time.
See ya.